Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. Thank you, Jonathan and Lyn Gildon of the Gildon Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 275-star reviews on Zillow. That is pretty darn impressive, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan actually has a degree in real estate from Florida State University, and Lyn has a master's degree in business administration. To me, that's pretty good when you have people in the field that have education. I'm a huge proponent of that in my field as well. Their information will be in today's show notes. All right, so today's topic is form is everything. Now, I told part of this story in another podcast, and I'm going to tell it again because I think it's really cool, and it leads into the topic of today, which is form. And I saw on social media this guy who has lost a lot of weight. I believe it was like 130 pounds. And he was posting videos of himself doing a bench press on a Smith machine and talking about his weight loss journey. And he has quite a following. It's a pretty cool story, very encouraging. And he posted a video, as I said. And none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger saw it and commented on it, which I thought was really cool. And he said something to the effect of, "You don't need any pointers or tips on drive and motivation." And he said, "In fact, you've inspired me." And he went on to say, because I do believe the gentleman losing weight was asking for some form pointers. And so Arnold said, and I loved it doubly, First reason was it was obvious that how he just kind of chimed in and gave him reinforcement for his weight loss. But the second part was what he said is something I say all the time, which is put your mind on your muscles. And he told this young gentleman to make sure he stretches at the bottom of the movement, which was the bench press in this regard, and squeeze the muscle at the top. And I loved it because I say this all the time, mind to muscle. So I know I've done other podcasts on form, but I just want to cover it again. Form is so important. Like, to me, when I see poor form, it's like just raking those fingernails down a chalkboard. I just can't stand it. And I think with some people, it's purposeful. Some people, it's just ignorance. They don't know better. And some people, it almost seems like it's impossible to correct, which really doesn't make any sense because it's an action, right? You should be able to correct an action, but for some people, they just can't seem to get certain techniques of an exercise correct. But with me, form is critical. And when I work out myself, I just love to use proper form. To me, it's very meditative to just go through the exercise with complete quality versus just worrying about the quantity. And as I've spoken about before, I almost use it as a form of meditation. Like, I really put my mind there and focus on the form, and I focus on the feel. So let's talk about that. All right. So the first part is exactly what Arnold Schwarzenegger was talking about, mind to muscle. So there is an agonist and an antagonist to each exercise. And the agonist is the prime mover that's moving the muscle. Now, there are two parts to the muscle movement. There is the concentric, which is the contracting of the muscle, and there is the eccentric, which is the lengthening of the muscle. All right. So when the muscle is being contracted concentrically, we need to squeeze the muscle at the end of the movement. Squeeze the muscle at the end of the movement. So if we're doing a pec fly, for example, as we come to the top, we make sure that we squeeze the muscles, squeeze the pecs. The second part of the motion is the eccentric, or the lengthening of the muscle. That's when the muscle is stretching, so to say. We want to make sure that we are stretching the muscle within reason. There is a normal stretching, there is a normal range of motion for every exercise, and we have to either look that up or let a professional tell us, but within reason where we should stretch it to. But we should be thinking about stretching eccentrically at the bottom of each lift. All right, that's the first part of mind to muscle. We stretch at the bottom of the movement and basically feel a good stretch, and we squeeze at the top of the movement. All right, let's take a deadlift. All right, let's take a standard straight-legged deadlift, because I think that can give us a really good idea. So with a deadlift, let's say we're holding 2 dumbbells in our hand with a pronated overhand grip. We bend our knees slightly. We keep our back nice and flat, which makes our chest go up. And now we're stretching eccentrically down. All right. So as we go down, feel the stretch in our hamstrings and glutes. Feel it. Make sure you feel the stretch. Then at the bottom, come to the top and squeeze those hamstrings and glutes. This way, we're guaranteed to be targeting the right muscles as we work. Because as I've spoken about before with the deadlift in particular, it's very easy to not 100% use those targeted muscles and use a little bit too much of the lower back or other areas if we're not really staying focused on the movement, because we might not be stretching enough, or we might not be squeezing at the top, and then we're really not getting as much out of it as we can and should. All right? So we squeeze at the bottom. We stretch at the bottom. We squeeze at the top. All right? Another thing to keep in mind, breathe, 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 breathe. Now, in a perfect world, it's good to exhale on the concentric, the shortening, or the squeezing portion of it in a perfect world. And we should inhale on the eccentric, or the lengthening portion of the activity. All right? If that becomes confusing and you end up holding your breath, and sometimes people do, just make sure you breathe. But if we're really trying to work on our form, our breath can really, really help us. So let's take the deadlift again. We're lengthening the muscle by pushing our fanny back and really stretching the hamstrings and glutes at the bottom. As we're going down, feeling that stretch, fill the lungs, taking a deep breath. Get to the bottom, start to come up, release the breath out as we're squeezing the muscle. All right. So breath really, really helps us stay focused. It also helps us with the timing of the exercise. Now, sometimes exercises get really, really taxing on the pulmonary system. For example, squats, if done close to failure, your heart rate is going to be pretty darn high. There's no doubt. So you're going to be breathing to keep up with the energy. So you might have to take 2 breaths per cycle, and that is okay. So I just don't want you to think that it has to be that way all the time, because then you might end up holding your breath too much or not getting enough air. All right. So sometimes it's appropriate to take multiple breaths on a push. But if it's not the case, then really make sure that you're breathing in on the eccentric or lengthening portion of the muscle, and you're breathing out as you're squeezing the muscle as you get to the top. All right. So those are 2 parts to form right there. Let's take another one. How about talking? I mean, if you're breathing properly like that, then how can you be talking? Well, exactly. So technically, you're really not supposed to. Now, supposed to sounds very judgmental, right? But I can tell you, like, from a performance standpoint, from a getting the benefits standpoint, that the more you are talking during your set, the less focused you are. Now, as a personal trainer, we know we have people with multiple needs. We're very, very aware of that. And we know that some people really need to talk when they exercise. So it becomes a really big battle for us because we don't mind listening. That's not the problem. But we do want the person to get the maximum benefit of their strength training. And sometimes they're talking so much that I don't think they're focused at all on their strength training. Now, a good trainer is going to redirect somebody that way and explain the benefits to breathing during the exercise and explain the benefits of stretching at the bottom and squeezing at the top. And if we're really focused in like that, it's going to be very hard to be carrying on a conversation. Now, naturally, a little bit of talk here or there never hurts anybody, but when it's basically constant talk through a set, and I have heard it where I'm actually kind of blown away that the person can continue to work out with any intensity at all with the amount that they're talking. But it does happen, and I get it, but it's not going to be beneficial. I'm not one of those that's going to say you're getting nothing out of this because, that's silly. That's not true. If a person is essentially going through the correct form on an exercise and they're not 100% focused, obviously, if they're talking, but if they're going through the other parts of form, which means that they're keeping their posture good, they're going through full range of motion, they appear to be using enough intensity because they're getting close to volitional fatigue or muscular failure at the end of the set, then yes, they're getting something out of it. So I'm not going to be so blinded to say you're wasting your time, because they're not wasting their time. They're getting benefits, but definitely not getting maximum benefits. All right. So a lot of times you'll see people training in gyms who are wearing headphones and things like that. And, and I know trainers that do that. I mean, I'm guilty of that sometimes, and they're not on. Sometimes they are, but sometimes we're simply wearing them because we don't want to get interrupted. We don't want to get pushed or pulled into a conversation. And so that's sort of it's a cop out to just say, you're zeroed in or you're not, listening to people or whatever. It's kind of a smart tactic to do that. It's, I think, good because, we don't want our workouts ruined by a lot of careless conversation, because that's what it is. It's just like you're not putting complete care into your workout when you're doing it. You're putting it, partially there, which is, yes, better than nothing. But I think if you want to get maximum benefits, then you want to make sure you're doing everything maximally, right? So next part of that then would be tempo. Tempo means the speed of the movement. There is no perfect speed to strength training, all right? So there is no way you're going to push heavy loads fast, all right? That's kind of impossible. So a lot of the time, the tempo of the movement is dependent upon the load of the movement, and we're naturally going to go a little bit slower as things get heavier. Now, where we do want to control the tempo is to make sure that we're not going too fast. We can go too purposely slow, where the movement itself is losing some of the intensity because we're going a little too purposely slow. So that could happen. But most of the time, we want to just make sure we're not going too fast. And again, there's some subjectivity to this. Now, the one thing that's a guarantee or a fact is that we don't ever want to use momentum in the movement. We don't want to just swing weights or throw weights and use momentum, because then the muscles aren't lifting the weight. They're partly lifting the weight and the momentum's taking it the rest of the way. We don't want to do that because, again, we want to get maximal benefits right? Every time we work out, we want to get the most out of the time that we're there. And we don't want momentum to carry us through the rest of the repetition when the muscle is supposed to carry us through the rest of the repetition. As far as perfect tempo, it's only perfect for you. In a day, and I'll work with multiple people, in a day, I might say to one person, you're moving the load too fast. And another person, I might say you're moving it too slow. So it depends on what else is going on. If you notice kind of a rhythm that's not there with somebody because they're almost going too slow, and you can tell they're losing intensity, you can tell they're losing focus, you can tell they're losing rhythm, you can tell their breathing's off, then they may need to speed up that movement a little bit. Again, I'm a trained professional, so I can see those things. Now, if it's a lot easier to catch somebody going too fast because they're just swinging the load, and it's pretty easy to catch that. But there are some people I'll say you need to speed it up. Most people I'll say you need to slow it down. And some people just naturally find the right tempo. All right. There's different numbers out there. I mean, in the old days, we used to say 2-4 count. So 2 second on the concentric, 4 second on the eccentric. I don't think that needs to be, 100% written in stone. But I will say it is always better to take the negative slower than the concentric, the eccentric slower than the concentric, because the eccentric is 50% stronger than the concentric. So it makes sense that that portion of the rep should be double the length. So maybe a 3-second rep might work for you really, really well, where you're taking 2 seconds to stretch the muscle on the eccentric and 1 second to load the muscle on the concentric and squeeze. But there is no perfect one, but just try to make the eccentric a little bit slower and try to keep the rep speeds nice and consistent. We have some people that will pump out a few really fast, and then they'll stop, and then they'll do a slow one, and then they'll pump out a few really fast. Okay, that's not good form either. That's, we want a nice, consistent tempo the whole time, nice and smooth the whole time. Sometimes people are playing with the tempos like that because they don't want to hit muscular failure. They're delaying it because they might be too much performance driven. They might be thinking, well, I want to get 20 reps, so I'm going to hold this for a second and then bang out 3 more. But that kind of is the tail wagging the dog, because ultimately we want to hit volitional fatigue or failure because that means we've recruited every one of our fast twitch muscle fibers. So therefore we are going to get stronger the next time. So that's what we want. So why not just let that happen? And I tell people that a lot, but I know when they're too number driven, that's going to be a challenge because they're going to fight for that number I put out there. So as I've said in previous podcasts, it's very important for me to give them a range so they're not so glued in on one number, because really it's about getting to failure is what we're shooting for. So that is another part of form. Another part is to make sure that we're always using proper posture. I don't know how many times I say in a workout, keep your chest up and your back flat. So there's really never a reason to not do that. We should always be pushing that chest up and keeping the back flat. It's going to be different for everybody. Some people can go down in a 90-degree squat with their femurs literally 90 degrees parallel to the floor, right? And they're going to be straight up tall with their back. Literally, it's just the perfect angle. And some people can get down to 90 degrees with their femur parallel to the floor, and there's going to be a 30-degree bend at the spine, but their back is still flat. Both are correct. That is just a matter of flexibility oftentimes in the hip flexors. So the hip flexors are going to pull you forward a little bit. There's nothing they can do about that. That's just, if you have very loose hip flexors, you're going to be able to go down to a 90-degree squat and it looks like your back is sitting in a chair with a backrest. And that's great. That's awesome. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. But there's also nothing wrong with the person who's got a 20 to 30 degree bend at the bottom, as long as they're keeping their chest up and their back flat. So that's not a contradiction. It's not a rolled back. The shoulders aren't rolled forward at the bottom, giving them that 30-degree bend. No, that's just the angle of their back. So as long as the chest is staying up and the back is staying flat, they're in good form. And we want that always, every exercise, even a crunch. So when people do crunches, you shouldn't be rolling your shoulders forward. You should be lifting from the belly button, chest still up, and crunching those abdominal muscles together. When we're doing a low back exercise, same thing. The chest should be up, the back should be flat, and you're pushing up. And then, of course, on the obvious exercises like stiff-legged deadlifts, as I've already said, the chest should be up and you should be hinging forward, keeping that nice flat back. I'm one of those that if I went down into a 90-degree squat with my femurs parallel to the floor, you're going to see my spine bend at about 20 to 30 degrees. That's just, I got very tight hip flexors. That's how it is. But my chest is up, my back is flat. There's not a rounding in my back. All right. So that is still proper. Sometimes it's pointless to try to fix those things in the exercise, other than maybe not going as low into a squat, because when it does start to fall forward too much, then we're kind of defeating the point. But the time to fix that issue would be to actually stretch and loosen those hip flexors, which is going to happen via a good flexibility program. All right. So form is everything. And I just name the things that are most important. So when I say that to you, those are things that we're really, really looking for. But all of this is really taken care of if we have our head in the game. If we're thinking to ourselves, I'm going to really focus on my workout today. I'm going to focus on my form. I'm going to make sure that I stretch on all the negatives of my exercise today, and then I'm going to go through full range of motion. Then I'm going to squeeze the muscles at the top. I'm going to make sure I breathe to the best of my ability on all of these sets and really focus on my breath, focus on the feel, focus on the form. I'm going to go into a tempo that gives me a really good rhythm into the exercise. I'm going to focus on keeping my chest up at all times. So really, all of these things are accomplished if we go into the workout with the right mind frame. We have some people that come to the gym and we never see their phones. And they say things like, I don't want to be distracted during my workout. And I think that's great. Whenever I go anywhere like that and I'm paying good money, I make sure that I put my phone on silence mode as well, because I don't want little text messages popping up on my watch or whatever, because I want to stay focused, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. I can get easily distracted if I get messages coming in. But then we have others to where, we have a cell phone rule that we don't want it going off during workouts. We don't want people answering their phone, and like so many things, people have a million reasons why they have to violate that rule that particular day because they're waiting on a call or whatever. And it's like, again, not to be judgmental. It's just, how can you be 100% focused on your workout if you're worried about your phone? And if you're doing a 30-minute strength training, you can't tell me that you can't give yourself a timeout for 30 minutes. A timeout for 30 minutes. Like, it's you. It's self-care. It's taking care of you. You can't give yourself 30 minutes of a strength workout. And then if people are doing cardio with us on the treadmill or whatever, same thing. You can't just let work go for 30 minutes or whatever updates you think you need to stay on top of, whether it be sport updates or stock updates or whatever that might be. I mean, I know for me, if I'm guilty of like sending out some text messages before I work out, and then, I know if I start to check them, my workout is going to go down the tubes really, really, really quick. So I make sure that when I work out, again, I put it on silence. I put my phone on Spotify, whatever I'm listening to music wise, and I don't touch it until I'm done, period. Because if I do, I'm going to get distracted, and I don't want to get distracted. I want to have total mind to muscle when I'm working out. And I don't want to be thinking about, is this person, trying to contact me? Is this important? I mean, we all know what's important and what's not important, right? So it just really will do you a good service to make sure that when you go to work out, that you just have your head in the right space. Just really think about form and put your head in the right space. All right. So speaking of putting your head in the right alignment, thank you, chiropractic physician Dr. Doris Antos. She's a chiropractor in Ormond Beach. She's located on Granada Boulevard. We refer to her. Somebody said, do you really refer? I'm like, of course. Of course we do. Yes, she's a great chiropractor, and we only recommend people we talk about here. All right. She's phenomenal. Her information will be in the show notes. And as I've said before, she's a wellness person. Don't wait until something's out of alignment. Have a regular chiropractor that you trust and you can utilize more than just when you're hurt. And the same goes for massage. Okay. So until next time, form is everything. Stretch, squeeze, breathe, chest up. Be max fit, be max well.